I did get in touch with Bob O'Connor. Tammy had actually suggested that we might have him join us for some of the institutional knowledge that he brings, and I was happy to reach out to him. So if I understand, he'll join us this evening, but we shall see. Great. Hi, Tammy. Great. All right, we have everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and just let the rest of the folks joining us into the meeting. Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We're convening for this virtual meeting of the Lampson Brook Farm Board. I'll go ahead and just call to order this virtual meeting. It's 4:31 on March 5th. And maybe we'll just start off with with board introductions that can serve as a roll call and sort of confirm quorum. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm Vanessa Farney, representing the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Jonathan?
Jonathan Spiegel, representing the Belchertown Economic Development Industrial Corporation.
Jared?
Hello, I'm Jared Kennedy. I am the designee for Commissioner Randall at the Department of Agricultural Resources.
Tammy?
Hello, I'm Tammy with the Belchertown Agricultural Commission.
Jennifer?
Jen Soper with the Department of Conservation and Recreation.
And David? Oh, you'll have to take yourself off mute.
David Haynes with the Belchertown Conservation Commission.
Great. And we have I think we have Raina joining us. Raina, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Raina Rubin. I'm a Senior Project Manager at DCAM.
Wonderful. Great to have you with us. Let's see, do we have any other folks from the agencies? I don't think we do. Okay, great. Wonderful. So I have circulated to the board our minutes from the meeting held on February 3rd, and those have been posted to the website. So the first item for action here is to go ahead and pass those minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and put everyone on mute as we speak, because sometimes there's a little bit of background noise. So if you do need to say something, and you'll need to unmute yourself. Coming back to the minutes. So the minutes have been posted. Do we want to entertain a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Great. And then because we are meeting virtually, we'll have to do a roll call vote to approve the minutes.
I approve. Tammy?
Great.
Jen Soper approved.
David Haynes approved.
Great. So the minutes are passed unanimously. Okay, so the next agenda item, board updates and discussion of work in progress. This is really just to provide us an opportunity to check in on and recap any work that's occurred since we last convened, and then kind of identify the tasks that we want to move forward on. So since our last meeting in February, Jonathan has been working with Raina to send a letter to the Mass Historic Commission. The intent there is to update the commission on the work here at the farm, the work with the board, requests that they assign staff to provide review or guidance needed, I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to provide any further update. I did share the letter that you drafted and sent. And so I understand at this point
Right.
we're awaiting a response. But I just
Yeah,
want
just
to.
briefly, I would.
Mhm.
Just briefly, David and Tammy did have an opportunity to take a quick look at the letter and give some suggestions. And Raina did, and I figured out a little bit of strategy, not much. It's hard to have a strategy when when there's nobody home. We did some research. We have not yet received a response. And we don't know if we ever will, but the letter essentially, well, everybody received a copy of the letter. The site is registered in 1993. The entire state school was registered in the Massachusetts Registry and the National Registry. So it has been registered. There have been discussions over the years about activities and actions on the site, both from the EDIC with respect to demolition of buildings and preservation of buildings, and with NESP with respect to its lease and primarily management of the buildings, care of the buildings. So we'll see what they say. We asked for some staff support as we compose historic preservation restrictions. There are some examples that I think, Vanessa, you came up with that we could use. But I think it would be good to give another month. And I think in between now and our next meeting, I certainly will try to reach somebody at Historic Preservation. We sent a real letter with real stamps on it. I was informed that they do not use email, only written documents, which is a bit archaic, but you would expect that, I would imagine. So well, I was expecting to have to use parchment, but they didn't require that. Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Thank you, Raina. Yes. So I think, we're on hold to see if we get a response and any support. That's my suggestion anyway.
Okay.
Thank you for taking care of that, John.
Sure.
So are there any questions or comments on that piece? Okay. So we'll stand by, and Jonathan, you'll update us if you hear further from them. Great. Hi, Bob. We have Bob O'Connor joining us as a member of the public, I suppose.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Wow, that's exciting. So good. Okay. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Well, we're happy to have you here. You bring a lot of the institutional knowledge to the conversation, so we welcome that. We're just running through some board updates, facilitating some discussion of the work in progress. So in addition to the letter to the MHC, Jonathan also asked that I circulate a list to the board of some of the work ahead that he's been tracking. I did share that list. I can actually share it here. If you bear with me, I can share my screen. It's I think this might be something, Jonathan, you've shared before, but bear with me here. Too many screens. Oh, no, that's not it. Let's see, where's... let's see. Can folks see this? I'm not sure. Well, let me just go ahead and read the document. So Jonathan, you shared a list here. Conservation restrictions, preservation restrictions, the binding mechanism per the original intent, the management plan and legislation. You noted that we have a CC&R draft. You noted, of course, conforming legislative changes, financial management, DCAM guidance for next steps, the RFP process, selections and that transfer process, and of course, the role for the board in the future. So I think a few of these items are certainly timely as we have picked up some of the work and kind of come back to revisit the RFP process, the conservation restrictions, the preservation restrictions, and that CC&R draft or the covenant document that you referenced, Jonathan. All of those I did note. Well, the covenant document is definitely identified and referenced in the RFP document. I envision that if we're going to move forward with an RFP, that having some draft or form of conservation restriction or preservation restriction will be helpful as folks are trying to identify, what's, what the restrictions on the property would be, expectations for management. So, I was thinking we could pick up some conversation around that work. But I welcome other thoughts or input in terms of work that we want to continue to make some progress on. Jonathan, did you want to add anything to that?
You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'd like to suggest, thank you, that we tackle them one at a time and begin with either the conservation restriction or the preservation restriction for discussion, and then determine how we might move forward. The preservation restriction we just discussed relative to Mass Historic, and thought we might wait a while. You discovered, Vanessa, am I wrong that you had come up with a couple of examples from other sites?
So the preservation restriction, I recall what I sent to you was probably a link. The Mass Historic Commission does keep
yes.
examples of preservation restrictions on their website, which are, templates that satisfy their requirements and I think
Right.
could serve for our purposes. So in terms of sort of thinking about that work, we do, I can circulate that link to the board. But there are template documents for those preservation restrictions on their website. And they do have a contact as well who specifically is identified as someone who can provide guidance more generally, I expect, not specific to our property, but more generally to questions
Right.
pertaining to preservation restrictions. So
When we began this discussion, we also concluded that it was probably Jennifer who would be leading on this because of her experience both with conservation restrictions and the site. My just general thought about both of these is that we sort of begin to collect ideas that relate to the purpose of our board and the purpose of this conservation effort. Some of them that are in the management plan and and the legislation, rather than trying to write it from get-go. What do you think, Jennifer?
Well, I think that it makes a lot of sense to start by looking at the CR template that DCR has just finished. The caveat here is to remember that this conservation restriction will be co-held by the town of Belchertown. DCR's CRs are different from the ones that Mr. O'Connor used to review for EEA, in that we typically don't have to have EEA review our CRs, except that this time we're going to be co-holding with the town, so it will be a bit of a mashup. So I can post to the board what our template looks like. It's already 17 pages long, and it does not have, it's not structured to include the town.
Mhm.
So that would be an additional amount of work to go into this template, but it gives you an idea of what DCRs, CRs are held, what the typical prohibited uses and permitted uses would be. So I think it would be a good place to start in terms of what we want to do and what we want to prohibit on the site. And then we have another level of complication. If, for example, what if we are lucky enough to be able to work this out so that an indigenous group is holding the fee? And that's some new language for the CR that's in our template about indigenous use of the property. It doesn't necessarily mean an indigenous organization would hold the fee, would own the fee, but yeah, so it's fresh off the press. And Vanessa, should I just share it with the board, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, first of all, we acknowledge, like, I think the furthest we could get is to a form of or a template, right? Because the final details would have to be agreed to by a landowner, right? So, but having that.
Yeah, and
having a document.
David Haynes and I haven't duked it out yet, so there's that,
Mhm. I think it would be useful to share that template. I don't know how familiar all of our board members are with that, so that would be useful. And I imagine it's a public template as well. So, in terms of sharing that or discussing that at the next meeting, we could certainly do so.
Okay.
And then David, I think your input would be particularly useful on behalf of the town and the CONSCOM, which is sort of, to that point, Tammy, of course, you and Jonathan should review that carefully as well, and provide any input. And maybe I can suggest that at our next meeting, we talk about that document. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I apologize because I can't see everyone on here, so, okay.
Vanessa, I just had I think in the past we've talked about not finalizing the conservation restrictions until the new owner is selected, but I think having a template, and I think there's a different conservation restriction, maybe the EEA model that needs to go with the community farm, right? Because that's going to be not DCR or the town, it would be a nonprofit probably. So I think for the RFP purposes, if the board looks over the DCR model, and then does EA have a new model? I remember they were working on a new model, but
we have just opened up that can of worms.
okay.
So,
well,
anyways,
maybe the old model could be posted.
The old model will have to serve for
Yeah.
now.
So for the RFP postings, if the board is, maybe tweak the model ones for whatever they feel strongly about. And then the RFP would, if it doesn't already say that, would say the final language would be negotiated with the new owner and the DCR in the town for the forest, and and the historic preservation restriction would be with I guess a separate RFP to pick someone for that and for the community farm holding.
Right, and then there's certainly this question. I think what you proposed makes sense. So, being able to circulate that template, and we can look at the DCS template as well as the DCR template. They are very similar, but there may be some differences. And I'm just sort of clarifying for those who are not as intimately involved in the conservation review process. Jennifer's correct. Traditionally, DCR conservation restrictions, are approved at DCR because the town is involved. Bob, help me remember, but I think if there is a partner, it may need to come to DCS for review and approval. And I'll double check on that.
I don't
but-
know. I think so. Yeah, I don't, I
Yeah.
can, do you remember an example of CR co-held by, yeah.
Yeah,
And,
I've got one
go
that's a town and a nonprofit and us. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that went to the secretary.
Yeah. So I don't envision that it would be problematic from DCS, like that DCS would have any, that review would require significant changes from the DCR template, but we should just be mindful that that is going to have to be part of the process for secretary's signature. So yeah, I'll dig up the DCS template as well and circulate that, and we can determine if there's really any differences. If there are, I imagine they're fairly small or sort of technical in terms of how signatures are obtained or the different signature pages.
I have a question about like the co-holding with the town. When was that determined, or where was that determined?
That's outlined in the legislation.
Is it? Okay.
Yep.
And in the legislation, just for the historical preservation restrictions, that's just for the Jepson farmstead and the first barn and the horse barn, correct?
No.
But I
Because
think
that's
No,
what's in the legislation.
Enterprise zone as well.
no, there's,
I think- But
Right now.
I think, since the whole property is considered historic, basically historic conditions can apply. And I think one of the things that will be helpful from Mass Historic Commission is to help us determine what applies where, because certainly what applies to the forest parcel will be different than what applies to the Jepson farm. And that's what I'm hoping we can get some guidance on from them as to how to not, how to make it fit.
okay. In terms of the legislation, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I believe it's a historic preservation restriction that is on is it the Jepson farm and the community farm parcel? The legislation doesn't call out specific buildings. It refers to the different parcels.
I guess we'll have
Okay.
to see what
I think it does.
I'm not sure the legislation overrides the jurisdiction
Sure.
of the Mass Historic Commission, so
Oh, that was in the management
that
plan. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so Raina, you're correct. Like we should definitely get some further guidance, but at a minimum, I was just emphasizing that at a minimum, the legislation identifies a historic preservation restriction. I believe, is it on the community farm parcel or is it on the Jepson parcel? I don't have that in front of me right now.
Wouldn't we have to have it on the enterprise zone as well?
Well, I guess to Raina's point, that's a question for MHC, but no, not according to the legislation. And I don't think that, I think that could be really, unfortunately, a challenge if we envision new development on the enterprise zone. So we'll see what the Historic Commission has to say about that, but. Okay, so Jennifer will circulate that template in advance of our next meeting, and then we can pick up conversation around how to move that piece of work forward. Raina, I envision that having some template that is perhaps at least at a minimum, like reflects some of the details of this property would be useful, because we do have a letter from Mass Historic from some years ago identifying an interest in reviewing those documents, both the conservation restriction and the proposed historic preservation restriction. So I don't see any concern in moving that work forward in advance of a response, because that just gets us a little bit closer to having something to share with them. But do you have other thoughts?
Oh, I think, I think the work that the board has done will be helpful. Will be helpful for them because they'll understand the goals better and, we now have a good survey so they can see what parcels are for what. I think that should be very helpful for them to say, okay, well, the Jepson farm can be handled on its own this way and the community fields can be handled this way. I think that should be helpful.
Great.
So there's also a conservation restriction that was created with the EDIC when the properties Foley Field and Lake Wallace were transferred to the town, and to be held by a trust, and I don't remember who else. It wasn't the town because the town couldn't hold a conservation restriction on itself. The Conservation Commission. No.
No, Jonathan, it was only Kestrel who was going to hold it.
Kestrel would hold it. A lot of input went into that because of its proximity to the farm, and a lot of local input also with ideas about the nature of preservation with specific issues relative to invasive species and so on. I could provide that for the members because it is ideas that were generated here locally. It's been accepted by the select board, but not yet filed, just because of some legal complications for Kestrel, waiting for them to decide on holding the restriction.
That would be
This
great
is-
if you could share that.
I would be happy to do that. I'll send that to you, Vanessa.
Okay, great.
Distribution.
And just to clarify, that's,
Sorry,
Sorry.
Vanessa,
Go
I
ahead,
just
Bob.
checked the law, and the community farm has both a conservation and historic preservation. So you could, with that language, you could put the historic part on the barns and the conservation on the farm, I think.
hmm. Yeah, I've always found that phrasing a little bit odd in the legislation. A little bit vague.
So we're going to look at the templates then and other documents for ideas. And I guess if we can get some guidance from Mass Historic about their view of how and where to place the preservation restrictions. And Jennifer, if you can sort of help us sort through the ideas and your templates for the conservation restrictions. But I guess our first assignment is reading all this stuff. So
Lots of
not
homework.
tonight.
Would Kestrel be open to holding a a historical restriction? Does anybody know?
I would say no, because that's not what they do.
Okay, all right, yeah.
But the town's historical commission could be one, and sometimes Pioneer Valley Planning Commission will hold a restriction like that.
Okay.
Be worth asking.
That's an excellent point you bring up, Tammy, though, because we do need to identify at some point who's going to hold that historic preservation restriction, and particularly on the Jepson. And to Doug's point, I don't believe Kestrel Land Trust would be interested. I don't know that there are many land trusts that hold preservation restrictions. They tend to be quite different from conservation restrictions in terms of the level of detail and just requiring a different set of expertise and monitoring work. So
In this
We
case,
might-
the town might be able to hold it because they will not be the owner.
yeah, it would be worth, I think, I don't know if others have thoughts on this, it might be worth having some conversation with the Historic Commission and starting to suss out whether they would be interested or identify others. It's interesting, the legislation doesn't, as far as I read it, identify specifically how we would convey that document. I mean, I don't think it needs to go out to, you know, I don't know that we're requesting proposals for that piece. So I think it's a matter of finding a qualified entity that the board agrees would be a fit for holding that. And I don't anticipate that there's a lot of organizations. So identifying the folks who might be interested in that role might be useful.
And in the legislation, we are tied to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, anyway.
We can also talk to MHC about who's appropriate for that, because I've had a little recent experience with those restrictions. Is they just go with the owner. Nobody else holds it. As far as I can tell, it's just a restriction on the deed. Whether it's a memorandum of agreement or, you know, a total. I think we could look into what can be done that was appropriate here.
That, you know, if MHC identifies that a deed restriction would satisfy the requirement for historic preservation restriction, that would be great. I mean,
Yeah,
my
that might. I think that's what would be helpful to talk to them.
I mean, my experience is the historic preservation restriction is a separate recorded document, and it has a
And it's
grantee.
held separately. I mean, yes, they're recorded.
They're recorded. I don't
They're
know.
recorded with the deed, or is it attached to the?
Yeah, maybe there's a couple different forms they can take. Generally, I'll circulate that document that's on the MHC website, but I think traditionally they identify a grantee or someone, a second or third party, I don't know, to enforce. But Bob, was there ever previous conversation about that historic preservation restriction, the form it would take?
I think we were assuming it would be like a CR separately recorded and held by the town historical, or wasn't there a historical society was mentioned, I think, but because I think in the chapter 184 that, you know, where you define the conservation restriction, there's a separate section and it says I think the commissioner of Mass Historic has to sign off on so I think it's meant to be held by a third party, but it would be a lot easier if it was a deed restriction, certainly.
But, excuse me, but with a deed restriction, there's no monitoring and assurance of compliance.
Yeah,
Whereas if somebody holds it, somebody's looking at it, somebody's watching.
yes,
Make sure.
yeah.
Exactly. Well, we can certainly, I think we can probably work out, we'll take a look at the materials that are already posted on the MHC and certainly solicit their guidance on that. All right, well, that feels like we have some next steps on this piece. I think that's great. Is there anyone, I guess, I'm looking at the folks on the board from the town. Does anyone have a connection to the town historic commission, or know folks over there that you might be able to bring into the conversation?
I could reach out.
Okay, great. Wonderful. The other piece of these layers, I guess I'll say the covenant document is another layer of restriction. This is something that's called out in the RFP, and so I had flagged this for further conversation amongst the board. Jonathan brought to my attention there was a document drafted at one point, I think some years ago, by Elizabeth Roblica. I have not been obviously part of any of the conversation around the covenants, so I'm sort of interested to learn more about what the board was envisioning for this document.
Well, I can share the background. The covenants, we had some very protracted and difficult conversations around whether or not to use the mechanism of the CCNR for this property or for the parts of this property where it might apply. Essentially, it's like a homeowners association where it tells you how far from the sidewalk you have to put your fence, or what you have to maintain, or whether or not you could put up a purple roof, or whatever might be in a set of agreements, bylaws for a property that was that had a kind of a mutual connection. They also take care of, usually they have a fee attached to them, which is a proportion of the maintenance of the larger property, uh, sidewalks, clearing, whatever it might be, that maintenance that benefits all or most of the owners, the sub-owners of the property. In this case, all we really had was a CCNR and Conservation Works, which was supporting us. Elizabeth Woblecka brought this to us without, I would say honestly that she felt we shouldn't do this, but presented this as an example of what it might look like. The purpose here really is to find a mechanism that will deal with some of the unanswered questions of mutual responsibility, or legal exposure, or common maintenance. Things like roadways or trails that lead from one parcel to another. And what is the access that people have? If we are looking to have recreation or access in the woodlot, where do people park? And who covers the insurance for that? And so on and so forth. These are questions we never got to answer these yet. But were I to be an owner of a property and put forward a proposal for how I would manage it, and of course, our board is responsible for overseeing all of that, some of these should be answered in a way that they will be satisfactory. So that's why this is listed as work to be done. It doesn't have to be a CCNR. That's just an example of one way that groups that co-own or have co-responsibility handle it. So I'll stop there.
Bob, others?
That went over
Any-
well.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I
Doesn't it seem like we would do those agreements however they're legally done once we know who the owners are? But
They're
no?
usually part, Bob, of the process of owning. When you buy into or become part of the owner, it's established. The EDIC established ones, which we're wrestling with for the same reasons. Years ago, prior to any of the sales of the larger Carriage Grove properties, simply to ensure that we had a mechanism. We're wrestling with it also there because it's onerous, and potential people who want to buy into the property want to know what the fee will be and don't want to pay a fee if they're in one segment of the property for the industrial area, which might be a different segment. So we've had those come up. But as long as we can figure out who maintains the parking lot in the community farm when people go there to go into the woodlot, or who covers the insurance for the people who walk wherever it might be. I mean, one of the biggest issues for NESB is the insurance coverage that's required by DCAM in their agreement, in their lease. And it's not cheap. So these are real costs. It's not like, and then there's liability, signage, maintenance of those roads that lead from here to there.
is there any
Anyway.
reason So one thought, is there any reason that those wouldn't be broken out by the landowner? So wouldn't, if you have a proposed owner for the forest parcel or a proposed owner for the enterprise zone, they're going to need perhaps different forms of insurance. And I would expect that that would be their responsibility as individual landowners, no?
Yes and no. Currently, the insurance for the EDIC property and for NESP, I believe, is a single policy that covers activities and areas and buildings. So I'm not sure that it has to be. I would imagine it could be separate, but then how do you handle when somebody's crossing the boundary from one area to another, or when you
So
want to
in
have
the-
joint programming? Go ahead, Tammy. I'm sorry.
In the legislation, it's my understanding that it says that whoever owns the community farm is the manager of the entire property.
That's correct.
So wouldn't the owner of the community farm be making these agreements?
We could go that route. We just
Right.
haven't figured this out yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I-
that would mean that does that mean that owners of the other properties don't contribute to the cost of whatever those things are? We have to look at that.
I think we need to make sure that the RFP mentions this because I just was leafing through. I'm not sure who was doing such good editing of the RFP, but thank you. It says that, all the parcels could be proposed by one entity or two or three, and we prefer less. So until we know whether, there's one group that is going to say we want everything or we want two or three of the parcels. I mean, the only one we know about is the MDAR and the Jepson farmhouse. So the other three could be all under one entity or under three. So I think we just need to make sure that that's part of the negotiations once the owners are selected to finalize, and I think some of the roads that cross through parcels are going through MDAR's commercial farmland. So, the insurance and all that would be, just like state issues.
I guess one question I had as I was reviewing the RFP is it references the CC&R document, right? The covenants and restrictions. So if we want that, we're going to have to develop that in advance of actually receiving proposals. And it's sort of challenging for me to understand how we propose those restrictions without understanding what the proposed uses are. How do you draft covenants without knowing sort of what's proposed for the property, who the owners are, whether you're dealing with one entity or three, questions like that. So it's for me, it was like, there's a lot of work to sort out what that covenant looks like. It's a legal document. And of course, landowners, just as you identified, are going to have questions and concerns about that, including things like the fee structure. But then the question is, how do we sort out questions like the fee structure without knowing the nature of the proposals that are going to be received? So I agree that there needs to be a mechanism to ensure that, everybody's doing what they should do as a responsible landowner. Just as much as it's on the board to identify responsible landowners for, to recommend. I just question whether it would be a covenant agreement as you described, or if it, to Tammy's point, is sort of the responsibility of the general manager to work out those MOUs or MOAs amongst landowners for things like shared parking or, we already made sure in the survey plan to make sure there are opportunities for all the right of ways and in terms of road passage. I think that was envisioned to be addressed through MOAs or MOUs amongst the different landowners. So yeah, I'm interested to hear sort of how the sequence would work here with a covenant.
Raina, do you have experience with some of the properties you've dealt with where there was multiple owners that had to have some agreements between them?
No, only personally because I live in a condo complex and I know what we have. But I will say this, it's managed by a board, who manages the budget and everything for those things and tells people, but I would only say, I don't really have the experience for what you're talking about, but I would say that if you expect people to put in bids and proposals, they need to know pretty sure what it is they're going to be expected of them, so I don't know if it's, you can just work it out after somebody gets selected, because then maybe
Okay.
they can't live with it. I mean, at least a good framework, but I don't know. I'm listening to you and I was just thinking the same thing, is like, where has this happened before? I don't know.
And I mean, Jonathan outlined like road maintenance, access across parcels for the public, parking. Those are the main ones. It's not like,
Right.
Managing a factory or something. It's kind of a small thing, but yeah, it is something though.
Yeah. And, people could be told you're expected to put into, whether you call it a fee or a dues or whatever, that goes toward community stuff. And then you have to carry this level of insurance or whatever.
Okay.
And that would be specific to the kind of use. But yeah, maybe I don't know how complicated. Maybe there's a simpler,
Could we make that sort of generic and say that it has to be worked out after the owners are selected, and it's going to, but what we want is we need an agreement to manage the roads and maintain the roads and act. But I mean, if you've got a road going off to some part of the property that doesn't affect the other parts of the property, but they're not going to be, are they responsible for maintaining it? And so I think that's what the whole thing is about, and fees and everything else.
So
If
one
we
of the
kept
things
it-
in our legislation is talking about, there are two principles in our legislation which cause an intersection with this challenge. One of them is the idea of cross parcel programming, activities, events, etc., which currently happens now because it's under one lease. And the hope was that could continue. And that was in all of our initial documents. I don't even remember if it's in the legislation, but certainly in the management plan. And the second piece was coming from experience with respect to the current situation with Nesby's lease. When you have somebody who has a sublease on a large farming parcel and you got people trekking across it for passive recreation, which is one of the goals for our new configuration and activities. How do you manage that? How does the person who's farming that manage that? And so on and so forth. Where's the liability? So I don't know that we can wait until people are selected, because it may affect their interest, for one thing, or their willingness. But I don't think it has to be complicated like a CC&R would be, like the documents that were prepared for us. I think it can be pretty simple. We could simply ask, for example, someone who is proposing, let's say, for the forest parcel, to describe how they would, what kind of agreements they would sign on to with the community farm parcel, should they not own that, if they're not applying for that, in order to allow for visitors for passive recreation to the farm parcel to cross the community farm. We can ask them to put that in their response to the RFP. That's another way of doing it, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, I wonder if it would be useful for us to identify sort of what we think. I mean, obviously we can't envision the entire universe, but I think to your point, maybe it's actually a more narrow set of considerations, right? Parking, roads,
Right.
Public access. I don't know. Those are the three that come to mind. If we could actually define the list, maybe we could look at those items and determine sort of how is this addressed on other properties? Because I can think off the bat, there are certainly examples out there of ways that conservation groups have facilitated public access across private land, elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, parking. So maybe if we can identify the specific concerns and then from there identify if there's already a model or, how those are addressed elsewhere.
I'll write up a list and send it to you to circulate for people to add to it or edit. I'll do that tonight. For example, Kestrel might have examples of that. I don't
Okay.
think we've ever asked them.
All right. That sounds good.
Does the Snowmobile Association, who crosses this property,
They
they have
have a right in the legislation to do that, and the snowmobile trail has been marked in the maps,
no,
which
I
have been
realize,
approved. Yeah.
I realize that, but would the Snowmobile Association have language that they give to property owners when they're
Oh.
crossing property? Would they have that some of that language that could be used to give them the
Great.
right to use it and what their responsibilities are, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can definitely figure that out. That's from my knowledge. There's probably in some cases a trail easement that's granted. I don't know if that's necessary here or if it just needs to be a designated snowmobile use trail with the organization. Maybe there's a language in the deed for the forest parcel that acknowledges that trail and use, something to codify that. Jennifer, you probably have experience with this.
There's Mass General Law on landowner liability. And what it kind of boils down to is if you don't charge a fee and if you don't have some, hideous snare intended to trap the unwitting happy hiker, like some kind of tiger pit hidden with pine boughs, you're off the hook. If somebody's on your land and there's a trail and you didn't charge for it and they stumble on a rock and twist their ankle, ouch. But the landowner liability law is there to protect landowners from that type of lawsuit.
Yep.
This often comes up on many different CRs when a private landowner is concerned because, like a major trail goes through their property and they're inviting the public. Well, once again, as long as you don't charge the public and as long as you're not, deliberately trying to harm somebody, I can find that law, Vanessa. I've got it in my stash of stuff somewhere here. I'll send that along to the group too, but I think this is sort of a distraction for the purposes of the meeting. We're sort of really getting into the weeds here. We don't really need to freak out about this.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think it'll be helpful, Jonathan. You can draft that list. But to Jennifer's point, I think some of the issues can be easily resolved.
Okay.
But maybe there are others that we're not thinking of. Okay. And then we'll just sort of put a pin in the covenant document for the moment, because it sounds like that was a mechanism proposed, but it, like we've discussed, maybe there's alternative ways to address these concerns. So I'm just mindful of the time. It's approaching 5:30. Is there anything else that we want to any further updates or work in progress to discuss that folks feel we haven't? I did. Oh, go ahead, David.
Do we have anything on the legislation? Any updates on the legislation and progress on that?
I don't have anything.
That is another item that we have to figure out. I mean, I think, Raina, unless you've heard otherwise, I've sort of heard that there's no interest in pursuing sort of revisions to the legislation So maybe we figure out if there's an alternative path forward with DCAM.
I haven't heard anything, and I don't know what an alternative path. That would be another discussion.
I just had a message that the legislation failed to pass, Saunders legislation. That was what I heard.
Is that a recent?
Yep.
Recent. Okay. Which you said Saunders legislation. Is that the bill that was proposed last year?
I'm not sure. I don't have any further information, but if Dave was
Okay.
asking about the legislation, I'm assuming that's what he was referring to.
I think the question is, how do we move forward with conveying the land?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So maybe we bring this up at our next meeting.
I really think that
So-
this is something that maybe involves people outside the board and beyond the board and with the
Mhm.
board, besides just, it's just my thought.
Like who?
Well,
The governor.
well, yeah. I mean, or some representative, yeah. So.
Anyways, I don't want to, I'm cognizant of the time, and I know that we could spend a lot of time on this topic again. So I'm happy to put a placeholder on the next agenda. But I think thank you, David, for asking the question. And I think at this point, we are still sort of in a position where we're waiting to ensure that DCAM has the authorization they feel they need to pursue a conveyance, if that answers your question. The next topic on the agenda was other items for the board to raise. So I think that, do folks have other items to raise? I had one which I wanted to bring up, which is just this question. I don't know how much time we want to spend on this, but the question of appraisals, this kind of ties in with next steps and the RFP document, right? So the legislation makes reference to appraised values or appraisals. The RFP document makes reference to appraisals. Raina, my sense, I welcome your thoughts on the timing for appraisals, but I also want to hear from the board in terms of sort of when we would envision the appraisals to take place, timing and cost for this task. I'm just cognizant of the fact that we're moving into leaner times at EEA in the next fiscal year. I'm kind of interested to know, and I look at Gerard and Jennifer. I don't know how much appraisals on this property would cost. I don't know if there's any benefit to pursuing those sooner rather than later, or where we think that fits in with the RFP process. But I just wanted to get thoughts on the timing of that piece and whether I need to advocate or see if EEA has a little bit of funding available as we approach the end of fiscal year 26 for this task. I don't know that we're ready for that. It would obviously have to be probably updated at a later date when we were in a better position to pursue proposals. Raina?
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead. Somebody else talking?
No.
You guys tell me if you have, maybe it's different but for the appraisals that we do, industry standard is that after a year, they're considered stale. And the thing about updating, it's not an update, the appraiser, it's it's almost the whole thing over again. I mean, you won't save a lot of money.
Mhm.
At least that's what the appraisers keep telling us, just doing updates. So I don't know what to say about timing other than, we don't want to waste money. Although, maybe, maybe I don't know. We
Is
don't
there
wanna-
an appraisal? Historic?
Is there? I'm not aware of one. Bob, were there
I've
ever
never seen one.
appraisals? Okay, no. No, so the question is like, is that something to pursue? But my concern is that given where we're at with our broader question of when the conveyances would take place, I don't know that there's really an opportunity to do that in the near term or a reason to. But I don't know.
Is it in our
The appraisal-
legislation? Gerard, go ahead.
So just in terms of sequence, the appraisals would need to be conducted for the parcels prior to
Being
the RFR
conveyed.
going out, or what's that?
For the disposition parcels, there's reference to appraised value in the RFP. So they
Right.
would have to be done before the RFP went out, I would envision. And I guess the question is, do we envision the RFP to go out within the next year? If not, I think we should hold off because to Raina's point, it would have to be updated or, best practices are to ensure that you have an appraisal that is dated within a year of, its consideration. So,
So does TCAM have to sign off on the RFPs?
I don't remember how it's written.
But it doesn't seem likely that
If
we would
it's
be issuing an RFP.
if it's a
Sorry.
conveyance, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I think when we do, we do dispositions of Commonwealth property, on behalf of other agencies. If we look at it that way, we do sign off on it.
Sorry, what was that? You do?
We do. I mean, assuming that we're looking at it the same as other dispositions of Commonwealth property into private ownership.
So are you saying that you do review the RFRs?
Yes. When you say review, yes. Yeah, we do. And we often handle the process.
Well, you write the RFRs too, so you're
Sometimes,
right.
not always.
Not always. Okay.
Depends. I mean, a lot of times, like, Gerard, remember what we were doing for Templeton? Ag did most of the writing because it was agricultural property. And,
Okay.
we kind of made it fit the legal part of it in the process and everything. But, the agency, the control agency is usually the one that knows best.
Yeah.
What they want, what they're looking for, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the legislation does say that the division says that the board, with the approval of the division, shall seek proposals. So I'm not sure what approval means. That means approving the RFR, but we're kind of a ways from going out with an RFR anyway until that issue is locked down of transfer. We can't issue the RFRs until we have some assurance that, I think we just lost Raina. We have some assurance that parcels can be transferred.
That's my sense. So I just wanted to hear from others if there was any reason to consider that work sooner rather than later. But my sense is there's no urgency to that. And really no cost savings to pursuing it in the near term.
And I need to check with Raina on this, but the Chapter 7 process is always to select the future owners and then file legislation with those names to
No, we don't.
make the transfer.
No,
Nope.
I don't.
Are you there?
Not necessarily. I think, we have legislation. It's flawed. Hopefully it can be fixed, but the legislation authorizes this process. It outlines this process. It details this process. So we don't, from there, we can move forward.
So are you saying we could move forward with an RFP now with DCAM's review and approval after it's written?
I'm just saying we don't need another piece of legislation specific identifying anybody else. I mean, not for that. That's all I'm saying. I mean, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't need that.
I think Bob was asking if we don't feel like the legislation at present is adequate, if we were to move forward with the RFP process, solicit proposals, make a recommendation, and DCAM agreed with the recommendation, could then the path forward be the filing of legislation specifically naming that entity for the conveyance?
It would be a much simpler legislation. It wouldn't it would just say that DCAM is authorized to transfer this parcel to this owner, this CR to this holder, whatever the RFP had decided. That would have a lot better chance of passing because it was just like
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That's a different approach. You guys, some of you has been around a lot longer than me. Most of the legislation specifying property transfer is to a public entity as opposed to a private entity. So that's really a legal question. I'd have to find out if that might be an approach that we could do because it would be narrow enough that I don't know.
I mean, the Nestle lease, which is not a permanent transfer, but it is a transfer of property right, was to a non-public entity. I don't know if I'm trying to think, are there other ones like that I've seen? You're right. Most of your land goes to towns and state agencies.
Yeah. Oh. I have to bring in people who know more about what kinds of things you can and can't do with legislation. I'm laughing because it's a very you'd think it would be a straightforward process, but I don't think it always is.
I mean, my experience with the Lampson Brook is that one of the reasons that the legislature doesn't want to touch this at this point is because they know there's a controversy potentially between who would own the land. And so if that is resolved and decided who would own each parcel, it would be pretty straightforward then to just say we're transferring this to those people.
Yeah, I'll ask.
Okay. Yeah, it would be great if we could get maybe more of a defined answer to that question. I mean, if there's a specific legal reason we can't pursue that path, it would be great if DCAM can articulate that.
So okay, and Raina, I have one other question coming out of this conversation, if I could suggest it. The legislation in Section 5, I think it will recall the board, with the approval of the division and consistent with the recommendations of the management plan, shall seek proposals and select nonprofit, yada, 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 yada. It doesn't say that they have to be authorized to transfer anything. It just says they have to say that we could go ahead and issue RFPs and make a selection because they've already approved the management plan. If you could confirm that DCAM feels, yes, all that's required here is for us to say, go ahead and issue RFPs, assuming that the RFPs themselves might be reviewed by whatever DCAM wants to do about that. Maybe that'll allow us to move forward, at least in this measure, and be in a better position for the question you were just discussing a few minutes ago about the legislation.
Yeah, I think, I personally would be reluctant to go ahead with the RFR if I didn't think that we could actually act on whoever was selected. I'd hate to make them go through all that, and then say, oh, but we can't actually transfer the property. But if we have a plan coming
I
out the
see.
end, I mean, that would be part of, I think, what Bob was suggesting,
Understood. Okay.
right? I mean, you would go through this with the understanding that this is how it would move forward and see if there's a way to sort of bridge that gap, so to speak.
That makes sense.
So, great. I appreciate your help, Raina, sort of sleuthing out this question that Bob raises as to whether there's an alternative path forward through that Chapter 7 process. Okay, so it's 5:40. Any other specific items for the board to raise? I'm just looking. Any hands? Do we have any public comments? I want to make sure that we also have time to convene in executive session. But I will open it up for public comments. Okay. Hearing no public comments. If there's nothing further, does anyone want to propose a motion so the board can move to executive session authorized under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, so we can review the confidential draft RFP?
And I will
Thank you,
second.
David.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Approved.
Great. Quick roll call vote here. Jennifer approved.
Yes.
I just need to hear names and
Jonathan, yes.
confirmation.
Jennifer Soper approves.
Tammy approved.
David approved.
And
Excellent.
Jonathan approved. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you. Any of the other members of the public joining us tonight. We are not going to reconvene after executive session. So we're going to go ahead and close out here, and I will see the rest of the board in executive session.
Thanks, Bob.
And Bob O'Connor, you are invited to join us. Thank you. I'm hoping Bob makes it over. It's great that Bob's system is working. He can join us. It's about 5:45. I thought, well, I'll give everyone a moment here. I just want to confirm everyone saw the document I circulated in an email some time ago. Okay. Just waiting on David. Okay, there we go. Thank you for bearing with me on all of these technicalities. Trying to manage a meeting with votes and motions and taking minutes is.
You're doing great. Thank you for doing all you do.
So, okay, so we're going to convene this executive session here. Thank you, Bob, for joining us. I did invite Bob to join us at Tammy's suggestion. I think, Bob, it's great to have you here. You have a lot of institutional knowledge, and I know there's been a lot of discussion around this document in the past. So we're just trying to pick up this document and this work. I circulated a markup. So we met back in February. I shared out the comments received from Marina. They were relatively high level. She'd broken them out by section, and we went through most of those. There was an agreement that providing an introduction would be useful, updating the document to reflect the details of the survey plan would be useful, making sure terminology was consistent throughout, the document was consistent. So once I got in there and started doing some of that, I apologize because I kind of went a little crazy by my own admission. So I tried to make sure my comments reflected the intention behind the changes. And if you have, any specific concerns with the red line, again, my intention was to address those things we talked about at the last meeting and basically achieve some consistency throughout the document and kind of consolidate some of the language. But you are welcome to send me your, if you have further revisions or concerns about any of the revisions, you're welcome to share that with me in red line, in your own red line, or in response to comments provided, or in an email if you want to summarize. So you will not hurt my feelings. I'm not doing this. I'm just trying to ensure that the document is clear and concise and updated. So
Did you, I'm sorry, did you send out a new document?
this is the redlined version I sent. It was probably several weeks ago now.
The 26th,
Okay.
February 26th.
about then, yeah.
So I'll open it up. I mean, if anyone has like high level concerns or questions or items that they want to address, I'll just open it up and start there. I think we discussed some of the sort of tasks, questions I had as I was reviewing this around things like the covenant document and the status of that. So we talked about that in the open meeting, and we can just sort of table that for now until we come to some conclusion as to whether that's going to be incorporated or not. We'll make some progress on the conservation restrictions and the HPRs. But in terms of the document, I guess I'd love to be able to kind of work through any of the specific questions that I flagged, or if people have concerns or questions about the revisions, we can just spend some time on that. And if you want time with this after the meeting, that's certainly fine. We can identify a date by which you can send me your more specific edits or comments, and I can work to incorporate those. I guess I would propose, if nobody has, I would like to go ahead and incorporate changes where everybody's in agreement that the changes make sense, but I can provide folks time after this meeting to go through it in more detail if you need that.
I totally missed this, so I'm sorry. I didn't see it.
Tammy, it's on the 19th that she sent it.
No, I see it now.
Okay.
But yeah, sorry.
It's the document dated February 9th. That's the latest one.
Let me open it up.
And I love a crazy red line document, so
Awesome. I'm just going to open up my version. Yeah, it's dated February 9th. I sent two copies. It's the same document, but I sent it with all of my red lines, and that document is labeled VF red line. And then I sent a clean copy, which just incorporated the red line so that you could read it without, stumbling through all the red line.
Yeah.
So that's what those two documents are. I wanted to make sure you could review the red line, but I also wanted to make sure that you could see what it looked like as a clean document.
I have one question. Do we want to include the management plan as part of one of the appendices?
I
I
think
know
what
it's small.
might make the most sense is to reference it as a link. It is on the website. But we could also, I mean, we could incorporate it as an appendix. I think it's a pretty big document, so that would be my only concern.
Right.
Do people object to incorporating it as a link?
No, I think it would be a good reference for people to have when they're putting their proposals together.
Absolutely.
They will need us.
Yep.
I had two questions about the MDR parcel. Is that kind of going ahead as a transfer directly to MDR without? Yeah. Okay.
So the
And-
current agreement is currently with TCAM.
Oh, okay. So
We will simply take over TCAM's role as it relates to NESFI and the leasing of those, subleasing of those parcels. But longer term, there are some issues that we need to work out there.
So do you think that's going to happen, in the next year or?
Yes.
Okay. The other question was, is
your experience with projects, and you've got long timelines, so yes,
well,
hopefully
that's progress. That's good. The survey has been recorded in the registry.
Yep.
Okay. Well, so and do you have like the book and page you can refer to for that?
We do. Yeah, I can certainly. I think I was in. Yeah, that's actually probably a good thing to incorporate here is this specific reference to the book and page. It's also incorporated as, or would be incorporated as an appendix. So imagine the book
And
page.
that's like a huge accomplishment also, I think, given. So, and I think Raina's really happy that happened too. So, I think the only path forward, given that the legislators are not really responding after years of trying, is to do the RFP, do the selection, and then the pressure, then the legislation would be very simple. It would just say these parcels from this book and page are going to these owners. The appraisal is an interesting question because I think it's true that the update is, if an appraisal costs, I don't know, for this kind of thing, it might cost more than $4,000 or $5,000. So yeah, but I guess you would need the appraisal for someone to make a reasonable bid, but the bids are for the land as restricted, which is way cheaper than, except for the enterprise zone, which is not restricted. But
We don't know if it's
by
going to
the,
have a historic restriction.
Okay.
It's restricted by the zoning.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Make sure that the RFP mentions and refers to the proper, bylaw that was passed. And, thanks to Doug and many others, that was another accomplishment too.
Yeah, that
So, yeah, so I think that the difficult thing, assuming DCAM agrees to let you edit the RFR and then they approve it or finalize it. The difficult thing is choosing who applies, who you think gets the parcel. So
I mean, the appraisal situation is, if it's not a matter of DCAM wanting an appraisal to know how much money they're gonna get for the property or whatever. If it's just for the people that are buying it, they can do their own appraisal.
They could. I think we would want our own appraisal. The RFP makes reference to the idea that we would consider the appraised value in our evaluation of, whatever payment or whatever their proposal identifies, they would be paying. So I think we would want our own appraisal if that's the case, if we want to consider the appraised value in our evaluation of proposals.
So I would say that if Raina seems open after talking to other people at DCAM to having the board finalize an RFP and then DCAM finalize it, then it gets issued. I think if they're okay with that, then I would advocate to do an appraisal, because then you would have real bids, and because it'll help people that are bidding, because I don't think the appraised value with the restrictions will scare people away. It should be fairly low, except for the enterprise zone.
Well, should we have people bid on this? I mean, should we be sharing the appraisal with them? Should we have people bid on it based on what they're willing to pay?
It says the language in the, oh, go ahead, Jennifer, do you have it?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna say what you were, the total consideration must meet or exceed the appraised value of the disposition properties. So if it's got to meet or exceed an appraised value, we better define what that appraised value is.
Right.
I mean, the other issue is if the board makes a recommendation to DCAM on owners based on what they bid, based on the appraised value, and then let's say it takes 2 more years for the legislation to pass transferring it, their bid based on the original appraisal would still be good, right? That's what you accepted. So you wouldn't need to update it later when you transfer it, I don't think, would you?
We're gonna need a legal to wordsmith this thing to make sure that that's the case.
But that should be at DCAM, I think, I hope.
The legal review, yeah. So I asked Raina that outright. As she acknowledged that this needs to be reviewed by legal on their end, and she doesn't have counsel assigned. And so Bob, I feel like there's 2 components of this that need to be, there's a lot of pieces that DCAM needs to review and confirm, because the process of evaluating and soliciting proposals, right? The RFP as it was drafted contemplated the proposals being submitted to DCAM. And speaking with Raina, I don't, at least from what she's representing, and again, maybe legal has a different perspective, but she doesn't feel that the proposals have to go to DCAM. So they would come to the board. So we talked about the fact that we're not necessarily beholden to posting on combis, which is fine. We have other places we can post, but we should figure out, if we're soliciting proposals, and DCAM confirms that the proposals don't have to be submitted to DCAM, which is the impression Raina has left me with. How does the board solicit proposals? Who do those go to, right? And what's that process look like? The other piece of this I need clarification from DCAM on is there's a lot of language that pertains to the evaluation of proposals that contemplates DCAM participating in that evaluation. And I think we have to be really clear with DCAM and the board as to how and where DCAM's evaluation comes in. Is this the board's recommendation to DCAM, or is DCAM going to be able to evaluate proposals and be part of the recommendation to themselves? So there's just some language in here that contemplates different DCAM's participation. And I want to make sure that we figure out sort of what I think we're in a position where we can propose what we want to propose to DCAM. If we don't want DCAM evaluating proposals, we should modify the RFP to reflect that, because I have not heard from Raina that, they're taking a position one way or the other. And I feel like I would love to get this to a place where the board feels like we have taken it as far as we can, and then pass it back to DCAM and say, explicitly, we need X, Y, and Z to proceed. Provide us a timeline for your response. Like, Bob, to your point, I kind of want to start to put the pressure on DCAM to act again, or give us a clear answer as to why they won't act. And I feel like if we can demonstrate that we've made all the progress we can with this RFP, maybe that would be helpful. David, I see your hand. Did you have a comment, David?
Screen is frozen.
Yes, I have another meeting that I have to go to at 6 o'clock. I don't, can you continue without me? This is all very good and I appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you. And again, if you have comments or questions on the document, you're welcome to send those over to me. Do we, given that it's 6 p.m., I had it do we want to identify, like, it sounds like folks need more time to spend on this document, at least Tammy.
I do too.
Okay. Do we want to identify a date by which you think you might be able to? My thought is next time we convene, we should probably be able to address any further questions or comments. So what's a reasonable time frame to provide me comments?
Well, you're the one who's going to incorporate it. You make the date. When do you think you would have time to do it?
Not next week. So honestly, towards the end of the month is fine. If you want to say like the 20th, 18th or 20th. I'm not going to get to it anytime before then.
How about right
That
after
works.
that weekend? The Monday after?
Okay. Should we say the 16th? Monday the 16th?
Oh,
Can
That's
you make
good.
it later?
For comments?
Can you make it the following week, like maybe the 24th or the 25th?
Okay.
yeah,
The 24th, March 24th.
yes.
Okay, so folks will send me their edits, comments, markup, whatever it is, by the 24th. And just make sure when you do that, that you do it in redline, because I won't be able to decipher if you don't do it in redline. So
You're talking about track
Uh,
changes in Word, right?
track changes, yes. Track
Because that-
changes.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
Or you can put, if you have comments, you can put those in the comments. You can put them in response to my comments.
I'd like to put comments on the RFR. I think it's really important that the criteria be tightened up for evaluation. I don't know if those criteria came from the legislation, but they are very subjective, perhaps.
Mhm.
And if there's a way that we can perhaps tighten them up in such a way that they can be award a number or yes or no, or something that is as objective as possible. Like what you have in some of your grants, Vanessa, out of DCS.
Were those sent
No.
out? The rubric? Was that in that same email?
Well, it's in the RFR, so the criteria
Oh,
for
okay.
evaluation are listed. So there's no rubric that's been circulated, but just something that we can be this, because I think there will be a lot of interest to have solid reasoning for decisions.
So Jared, I know MDR probably has maybe experience soliciting proposals for farmland. So I take a look at those and feel welcome to propose anything that you
Yep.
see if there's additional detail. But I appreciate you flagging that. So, because I agree, we're going to have to be pretty concrete in terms of how we're evaluating proposals. Otherwise, the board's going to find themselves in a very gray area. And then the other item I flagged for further discussion is the total consideration, right? So there's reference to total consideration, which consists of a cash purchase price, but then also refers to community benefits. Cash purchase price is pretty straightforward, but then there's this consideration of community benefit, which I can appreciate that we may want to consider that, but we just have to sort of define what we would consider a community benefit and or how they articulate the community benefit. And then I think there's some reference to them providing a valuation for that community benefit, right? So, you know, what would we consider, you know, a community benefit might be they're going to manage the forest parcel with public access on the trails, but then how do we assign a specific value to that community benefit? Where do we? So I appreciate other thoughts on that language and or proposals for tightening up reference to community benefits.
And I'm trying to remember when I first wrote this, I was copying a RFP that DCAM had written for a parcel in another kind of state hospital type parcel that was very current at the time. And I think that's where I got the community benefits, because that parcel was probably worth a lot more than the Lampson Brook farm. That's where they were giving those potential owners a chance to, you know, afford to do it without. And I guess the other thing while I'm thinking of that is the enterprise zone. We have the report that says which buildings need to be torn down and which ones could be repaired, and has an estimate for how much those would cost. And does it say that they could reduce their bid price by taking on that cleanup?
Not in the legislation, but we might consider putting that in the RFP.
In the RFP, yeah. Is it?
It's a lot.
And so if the enterprise zone, which is now larger than 10 acres, right? Is it?
A little bit, yeah.
If it's worth like a lot of money as a commercial development, and then they say that they will take on, you know, I can't remember, the price range of cleanup was like $1 or $2 million maybe.
Right.
You know, so that they would get it for free maybe, and I agree to clean it all up on a time schedule. That would be much better for us, right? For the farm.
Great.
But then we have to consider, what do we do if they don't clean it up?
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, so
you know,
maybe
why
we
not?
need to
Right.
Be very explicit in this RFP that the bid or the proposal for the enterprise zone should address the cleanup of those parcels, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you say that we're expecting the state to clean it up, then we're back to 1983 or whenever, you know.
Or last year, we asked
Yeah.
Nestle asked the state to clean it up.
Yeah, yeah. So, but if someone is supposed to pay like, I don't know, say $5 million for that land and have like a you know, a big use for it, and then, you know, there must be a way for us to get a commitment in a solid contract for them to do the cleanup if they're not going to pay.
Right.
I wonder if DCAM has experience with that, or mass development. Don't they have experience with that?
Not sure. I can ask.
How do they take, you know, money off the cost
Yeah.
and get a cleanup without worrying about what you just said?
Right.
I guess my concern with that is how costs have skyrocketed since that evaluation
yeah.
happened. But
Yeah.
it's definitely something great to consider.
Yeah, I mean, can't remember how much we paid for that, but it was, you know, it was quite a project for them to do that.
Totally.
Well, we've got a lot of immediate experience with them doing that on the upper campus. Those are all state and federal grants that they've been providing to take down all of the buildings that need to be remediated.
Yeah. One of my many frustrations about this whole project is we were so close to having the state pay mass development to do the actual cleanup, and they would have done a good job, you know?
Yeah.
嗯
Oh, well.
Okay, well, I know we're at about 10 minutes past time, so Bob, thank you for joining us tonight, and I might end up having to circle back. That's helpful to understand sort of I did find a document that was very similar to what you developed that I imagined that you were building this off of, so. Okay, so folks will have until the 24th to send me their revisions, and then we'll work to clean this up and see where we're at with some of the other pieces, CR and HBR, but hopefully we can get this back over to DCAM with some very explicit questions for them in terms of their role and responsibilities with the RFP process. There's a whole piece around the timeline for the transaction, which obviously we can't figure out what the timeline for the transaction would be without DCAM's input, right? We don't know what that schedule looks like. So I dropped something in there as a placeholder, and that is something that merits further conversation when there's legal assigned. Awesome.
One last thought that I wonder if there's one of the agencies or even the town that might offer the board like technical help during the review process, because this is, you know, I mean, DCAM is a big agency. They do this, but for whatever reason, they haven't done this since the state facility closed in the 1980s, so, or 70s. Because this shouldn't, and I already feel very guilty about what I've passed on to you, Vanessa. So it would be nice to get, if it's all okay to kind of go ahead with the board with DCAM's approval to issue the RFP, it would be good to have someone assigned to help who knows how to do this to advise the board. I think that would be a big help.
Someone assigned from, did you say
I'm not
the
sure
town
where.
or DCAM?
Yeah, I don't know. DCAM, you might have to wait a long time to get them to sign someone, but maybe, I don't know.
So Mass Development does this a lot, and
Yeah, that's a great thought.
and then the listing place where the state lists all these things, they have staff that handles both the listing and the cataloging of responses and scheduling of questioning meetings and so on. They do that too. What's the name of that again?
Maybe EA could have a contract with Mass Development to provide technical assistance for posting and reviewing especially on the enterprise zone. They would be very helpful, their knowledge.
Yeah.
And they seem a lot more willing to kind of jump in, if they're paid or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Could I talk with you offline about that? Because I'd
Yeah.
love to get your insights on
Yeah, I
that.
think that's a good idea, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Because I think if we ask DCAM, they're already kind of want to put an arm's length on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of my big miscalculations was I thought DCAM wanted to be out of the owning this farm. And I think that they do want to be out of owning this farm, but their bureaucracy is just kind of like overwhelms that desire.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Mass Development has had, I don't know how to phrase it, they've dipped their toes into this farm from time to time with other projects that have come along, or even just to help out with the remediation. So they already have some familiarity with the farm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Claire
And it's
O'Neill.
to their benefit too, to have a
Correct.
beautiful farm next to their development.
Okay.
All right. I'd be happy to follow up with you, Bob, and pick your brain on that. And then Jonathan, maybe we can talk about how to
Let me
approach
know.
Mass
Yeah, let me
Development,
know when.
if you are
Okay.
familiar with those folks, because I think that's something that the town would be better positioned than well, we'll figure it out.
Find out about a grant, and then that'll underlie the conversation as Bob suggested.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, I want to make sure we can let folks go, so I'm going to go ahead and just make a motion to conclude.
Do we want to set another meeting date?
We could. Do folks want to do that now, or do you want me to poll you over email? I'm happy. I mean, let's say the 24th for comments. You're going to have to give me some time to incorporate that. So we're looking at maybe the end of April. Which I don't know how my calendar is looking. Should we look at that week of
The 23rd?
21st? Yeah, the 23rd
Of April?
of April, which is a Thursday.
Hey, that's good for me.
Yeah. Same time, 4:30 to about 6 p.m.
Yep.
That works for everyone?
Wow.
Great. Okay. All right, then I will, I'll propose that. I'll send out meeting invites and get that on calendars.
I move
Excellent.
to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
I second it.
All right, meeting adjourned at 6:16 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.